Hello everyone, Promoter Fide here. I will be reading a pastoral letter from Father Gregory Hesse. The link to the original source will be in the description below. Just a quick word about these pastoral letters. They were written by Father Hesse to help explain to the laity a lot of the more important theological details about many of the important feast days and holy days throughout the year, or throughout the liturgical year. He was planning to write a letter for all such days. However, sadly, he passed away before he could complete them. God rest his soul. Anyways, without further ado, I will begin this reading. I hope you will enjoy. God bless. Oh, and as a very brief aside, these letters were originally written in German, and so in order to bring them to you in English, I had to translate them using some free-to-use online translation websites. So the translation may not be entirely accurate, but I did what I could to try and get the best that I could out of it. I am not a native German speaker, so if anyone is, please keep that in mind. The 7th Sunday after Pentecost, July 3rd, 2005. Today's gospel is all too well known to those who remain true to tradition. It is almost always applied to the truly catastrophic consequences of the Second Vatican Pseudo-Council. This in itself is correct, because the tree is recognizable by its fruits. If the so-called Catholic Church, which John Paul II calls the Church of the New Advent, is a haven for homosexuals, child abusers, and, above all, heretics, when the Pope gives blessings together with Anglican laypeople disguised as bishops, venerates and kisses the Quran as a quote-unquote holy book, and practices satanic rituals with animists at Lake Togo and Cameroon, then one must not only face the error of the Sedevacantists with the greatest understanding, but also consider the Lord's words in today's gospel, from which it becomes clear that the reforms of the past 60 years are not the work of the Church. Nevertheless, one is mistaken when one shifts the weight of today's gospel to the errors of doctrine, for that is not the message of Christ. In the 2 sentences before the gospel text, Christ speaks of the broad path to hell and the narrow path to heaven. In this context, the following is to be understood. If the Christian is faced with the choice of the path, he will soon be surrounded by some signposts. In the Old Testament period, these were the prophets. That is why Christ speaks of the false prophets. They are wolves in sheep's clothing, which means they act as if they belong to the herd. But under this disguise, they are ruthless egoists, if not worse. Arrogance or even Satanism are worse. Their sheepskin is the outer demonstration of their all-too-good Christianity. They gain the trust of the other members of the flock by pretending to be prophets of reason and liberation, or by doing everything possible to exude the impression of holiness. The former are the supreme heretics, who, at the expense of the ecclesiastical magisterium, propagate seemingly reasonable compromises, such as married priests, female priests, and, what a surprise, encourage sins against the 6th commandment as contemporary and modern and even necessary. Those who are true to tradition need not fear these wolves. But we have to fear the latter. They are committed to faith and tradition, pray eagerly, sacrifice a lot. Everything about them seems to be orthodox. They are hypocrites, often in priestly cassocks. There was a priest who was invited to a wedding. Before he left, he ate an opulent meal at home, and on the astonished remark that he was about to have a wedding meal, he said, "No, no, caution. There you shouldn't give the impression that you were feasting." What would a completely normal old village pastor have told him? On another occasion, a seminarian complained to his superior that he was treating him inhumanely, whereupon he gave the remarkable answer, "A priest must be supernatural, not human." What would St. Pius X have said to this priest, who here perverted the doctrine of St. Thomas Aquinas on grace, according to which the grace of nature requires, by 180 degrees? "By their fruits you will know them. It is a law of nature that no tree can produce fruit of another kind," and so the supposed saint betrays his true mentality as the two priests mentioned above. They can still have so many merits. They are still the wrong signposts. The first priest preaches sheep's clothing by his own example, recommending not abstinence, not having himself, but showing it. He does not breed the real virtues among the faithful, but Phariseeism. The second priest goes a step further. He suspects himself in the state of grace and concludes that all virtues are in him. The fact that he is also preaching this is destructive. Does he believe, for example, that a man who is naturally loveless only has to receive the sacraments in order to shine with love? Does confirmation give the village idiot the light of wisdom? Does confession give the quick-tempered person meekness? The first priest believes that it is enough to pre-exercise the virtues, and does not know that they can only grow in love. The second priest believes that one does not have to overexert them at all. They come with the supernatural, sacramental, sacrificial life. Has he forgotten the wisdom of the first fathers in the wilderness? That if one has defeated all the iniquity, one can stand before the worst sin of pride? The third mistake is the consequence. Contemplation is almost more important than the breviary, said a third priest. Contemplation, however, is the subjective view of the Scriptures, but the breviary is the objective reading and prayer of it. Thus, the believers are formed by the presented virtues, the lovelessness in the name of the supernatural, and the subjective understanding of the Scriptures, instead of the pious subordination to the loving words of Christ and the doctrine of the Church. The fruits are frightened believers, melting congregations, empty seminaries, and a flourishing of the Pharisees and the religiously insane. Not every one that saith to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doth the will of my Father who is in heaven, he shall enter into the kingdom of heaven. By the word Lord, Christ does not mean the later common term in the New Testament, but the address to the superior. This outer title of honor, e.g., by participating in the Sunday Mass and the kneeling, reception of Holy Communion, the pilgrimage, the Night of Atonement, devotion to the cross, is not enough, but the basic attitude is necessary. Man is all too happy to judge on individual deeds and manifestations, but God forgives 7 times 70 times. He looks from the light of the omniscient at the basic attitude, the constant effort. If you examine the grammar of the Greek text and look at the context, you can see that God is not asking, "What have you done?" but, "What are you?" Of course, mortal sin is a break in relation to God, and is always severely malignant, although it does not happen out of malice, which is usually only the case with the devil. That is why the basic attitude is more important here too, because it is only from this that sin against the Holy Spirit, that is, the irreparable, can come. Christ's invitation therefore concerns the basic attitude, the constant effort, interrupted at worst in weakness to do the will of the Father. Here we too can become all wolves in sheep's clothing, if we follow the false shepherds, who give us the external display of virtues, the lovelessness and the contemplation of one's own perfection as a guide. Like the Lord, so the man, as one says in Austria. But, as Christ says, we have only one Lord, and we first recognize his true servants by love. For if we do not have that, our faith may move mountains, but for nothing and again nothing.